Here's a video for the PENON Serial. It's a 3 dynamic driver set. Largest driver taking care of the low end, smallest taking care of the high end. This is probably the best $300 set that I've heard in a long time, if not ever. And it's, for many people watching this video, it might be a set you've never really heard of or you've seen on a YouTube video, which is an indictment to the hobby and all about connections and which sellers get more access, or it's just dumb luck. I don't know. I got this way late in the game, partly because I just wasn't really exposed to it. It sounds brilliant. You're looking at the graph right now. It's got sub bass over mid bass. It corrects itself before it takes its gain. It's got a gradual gain. It's not abrupt in any way. It gets to the sensitive region for a lot of people, which is 5K, and that's where it starts to fall off. It's got a little crevasse there, but the lowest point of it is not so much. It's about 2 dB lower than that mid amplitude, which is to say it's not bad. It's an upper harmonic cut. Most of the things that exist up here for my library would piano keys, electric guitars with distortion pedal, the harmonics, horns, the harmonics, male, female vocals, the harmonics, and sometimes tamping those down slightly with a cut is not going to, it's a balance between not becoming an artificial sound and having extended listening. This seems to be, like the TREBLE and other sets, preferred by myself if I can get something like this. I don't want this whole thing to follow a Harman or really anybody else's target unless they're putting a cut in it. I actually like this. It does have extension that goes all the way out. One of this is probably a couple of resonance peak, but then it's got another one, and it does in fact have energy about as far as I can hear. Everything sounds complete and it sounds really good. That is to say, there's nothing wrong with the replay. 3 drivers, all dynamic, playing in a cohesive, integrated manner that doesn't ever sound like there's a low frequency driver taking care of it. Like sometimes hybrids can sound like, oh, I can hear that dynamic driver. I can't really hear any separation between the drivers, which is kind of ideal for me. So the graph looks fine. The replay sounds fine. To get specific, Big Boy Kill Jill. I'm listening for a traditional bass. It's a triple drop. But prior to that is Hatsune Miku, and she's Vocaloid, which is a computer-generated voice. And can be intense. That cut up in the upper mid treble is actually beneficial right here because this sounds great. Sounds very nice, sounds sweet, female vocals, and then I get into the drop, which sounds authoritative like it's supposed to. 4-string bass guitar comes in, sounds very, very good. Go to the next evaluation track, which would be Black Sabbath, Masters of Reality. This is a track that has a bass guitarist and a drummer at about 2:36 of the version that I listen to, which is a vinyl rip, and it can get very much overwhelming. I really thought that it was maybe the track quality until I got some open back headphones like the Sasvara and others, and then it sounded much better. Listen to the original planar from Chi-Fi, which is the P1 by Tin Hi-Fi, that I didn't rec to people, but it had a clarity in this track right here that showed me that it was the performance of the drivers and the technical ability of all that I had heard prior, and not the track, because with the P1s I could hear this perfectly. I could hear the drums and I could hear the stick striking. I could hear the bassist pulls and releases at the same time. There was no masking, so I decided to keep it as an evaluation track because it's very, very hard to do. The Serial does it very good. Not as good as planar, but about as good as most dynamic drivers that I've listened to. I have the Elysian X right here, not because this is anything like that, but because it's got the similar glide that I just seem to find very preferential for my library. It gives drums and bass guitar the energy that I think that they need, and it doesn't interfere with male vocals and give them too much husk, which I would hear in the next track, which would be Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits. And this is a track that over time became very useful for every time the bassist sounded like he was too far up, like audibly, the mid bass of the set in question was elevated or bloated. And every time that the bassist sounded like he was maybe step back equal to the drummer, when it's not really the way that that track is supposed to sound to me, that I've heard in good and bad and otherwise home systems, car audio systems of all levels, live shows. It sounds like the bass is really supposed to be prominent in this track and only stepping to the side when Mark Knopfler is doing his solos and his vocals. But even while Mark's singing, the bassist is really pinning down this track, as they say. And over time, it became clear that when the bassist was not sounding Sounded fine, but slightly back. The mid bass of that set would be tight. The Moondrop Variations, the Monarch OG, the Monarch Mark II to some extent, the EJ07M, all of those sets play the bassist well, but sounding slightly back. Put a little bit more energy onto the low frequency and give it a glide like this instead of, let me go with the, do we have the Shure? Give you just an example of what I'm talking about. It's the EJ07M. See this right here? Get it in yellow someday. There we go. See this right here? From about 1 to 300 hertz. This difference right here is you can get a spectrogram, and you can isolate what exists in this zone, because I did, and it's a good portion of the bass guitar and of the drums. And if you take that down with an EQ on other sets, you can hear the diminishing returns live with an active EQ. Like while you're listening, pull these down, these frequencies between 1 and 300 hertz, and listen as the drum becomes less prominent. Is that what you want? It's kind of up to you. I prefer it to sound more natural to what I'm familiar with, which is what we're all going for. I think that the Serial does a great job, and it does it in a way that doesn't impact the mid-frequencies. Now, talking about the mid-frequencies, let's go ahead and get back to the music. When I listen to the mids, I'm really listening to, first and foremost, I'm listening to vocals. Because I have a rock and roll, R&B, hip-hop, reggae, bass library, and it all contains vocals. The only music that I listen to that doesn't is the Italians, Vivaldi, Verdi, some Tchaikovsky, but that's a very small part of my listening. Vocals you can't say a set is good for rock and roll, but it doesn't do vocals well. I keep harping on that, but that was said by somebody, and I thought, I'm completely baffled. If a set doesn't do vocals well, it's not going to do rock and roll well. Because I'm looking at Eric Clapton right here. I'm looking at Stevie Nicks. I'm looking at Mick Fleetwood. I can see Elton John over in the top left. If they don't sound correct, then that's not a set you want to listen to this music with. And Fleetwood Mac is, rock and roll. Eric Clapton is rock and roll. Elton John is, I guess he's kind of rock and roll. Piano based. I actually don't know what I classify him, but I guess almost like AM radio rock. Mids sound very good on this set. I like the replay. I got more. This is a unique set because I got more confused as I went along, because this set has been on the market for at least a year, and the replay is just very impressive. And it's not something that gets brought up regularly when someone says, I got $300. Someone will say the Dusk, someone will say the T, someone will say another set. I don't really ever hear the Serial being mentioned. Let me get the Elysian out. That was just a demonstration of a good bass glide. Puzzling. It does bass great. It does mids very good. Vocals sound great. Doesn't have too much mid bass that puts husk on male vocals. It sounds proper. It's got a gradual gain, ear gain. It's not throwing vocals in your face, which can kind of lead to shout or something like that. It's not doing that at all. It's starting to cut itself in an area where there's almost exclusively harmonic overtones, and they're not falling away too much. They're almost on scale with the mids on this amplitude scale, and it keeps extending all the way out. If we go to the treble, I listen to stuff like ELO is an album that's got a lot of energy, and it's got it all over the place. It never sounded like it was wanting. It was a very pleasurable listening. If somebody said, I have $300, what's the best rec? This would be one of them. If somebody said, I have $300 and I prefer dynamic driver, this would be the one right here. It's called the PENON Serial. It's 3 dynamic driver. There's nothing wrong with the tuning. The build quality is quite nice. It comes with a nice little case. It comes with a little pin strap without the Velcro that rips. Have you ever had those Velcros rip into a nice new shirt that you just got? And you're like, God damn. That's just a regular old-fashioned kind of fake leather one, which I'd actually prefer. So this thing didn't step wrong anywhere. And while I'm here, I ordered from PENON, and it took, I think, 7 days. I ordered the Muse, and it took 19 days. And 9 of those days was because it was pre-order, but it wasn't advertised as such on Hi-Fi Go. It's just said they had it. And when I contacted them 2 days later to talk about it and say what's going on, at no point was it brought to my attention that it's in pre-order, we don't actually have it, or we're not allowed to send it, or whatever like that. It's been sent back. It went from Hong Kong to Osaka. It went back to Hong Kong, from Hong Kong to China, and then back to Japan. True story. And I got it 18 to 20 days later. It's not a very good set. It's going to be in Planar Wars. It's going to sink or swim on its own performance, and that'll be over time. I think the things that I point out in the Planar Wars video are going to, I think there's going to be a lot of people that agree with that. The graph does tell some part of the story. The plastic on it is very much KZ-like, CRA. You know, when you hold that plastic and you feel like I could crush this in my hand almost. Real strong people. I could definitely step on it and break it. Where you wouldn't feel that way about resin. This right here, this PENON is like a resin or a very high quality plastic. I don't get that feeling with this, and a lot of sets like the Thea Audios and others. And then there's some sets that are just really fragile. I think the budget Tin Hi-Fi P1, or the cheap one that they had that was like $20. You knew that you could squish that one. This is like that, but it's smoked, so it looks nice. It doesn't sound very good. Everything, I'll get into it when I do the video. Pre-orders. Pre-order, if I want to do a pre-order, I'll make that decision for myself. If a company doesn't list it as explicitly as a pre-order, but I find out later, actually yesterday, today's the 22nd, I found out on the 21st that actually part of the problem was it was a pre-order and we didn't send it out till the 9th. Well, I have correspondence that are days prior to the 9th that didn't ever bring up the point that it was pre-order, because I would have said cancel my order right away. I'm not going to. Stealth pre-orders are very uncool by any company. Hi-Fi Go, Linsol, PENON, anybody. Audio 46 or 64, whatever they're called. If it's a pre-order, list it as such. Let people make the decision if they want to wait or not. I had to wait for about 20 days, and 9 of those days was unnecessary to be refreshing and looking at tracking when it wasn't really going to go anywhere. And then it makes me question the original tracking information because it wasn't even really sent out till the 9th. So that's a whole nother video, but holy crap, what a horrible experience. The PENON, $300. Yeah, definitely. And I'm out.